Welcome back to another episode of the Grief Observed podcast. I'm your host, Brad Morrell. And if you would like to join me for an episode, you can find me on Facebook, TikTok, and Gmail, all under the name of Grief Observed Podcast. Today, my guest is Sarah. She is a holistic grief and trauma coach. And if you go back to episode 112, you will hear another episode with Sarah where we discussed the loss of her brother. And today we're going to talk about some other types of grief, whether it's secondary losses, compound losses, ambiguous grief. We're going to just talk about the things that really go unspoken in the grief world. So welcome once again, Sarah. I appreciate you coming on. I'm excited to do another episode with you, and it's always great to see you. How are you?
I'm okay. Thank you for having me again. It feels like a long time.
Yeah. Episode 112. But honestly, I took a little bit of a break and seems like the episodes are starting to flow again. I had two today. I've got two next week. I don't know. It's starting to stack up again. And of course, with the weather changing and things like that, it gives me more opportunity and more time to hit the studio and talk to people. But why don't you tell listeners, in case they haven't heard episode 112 yet, and I
Yeah.
hope they do go back and listen because it's a really good episode. But in case they don't know who you are, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Sarah, obviously based in the UK, England, and I'm a holistic grief and trauma coach. And yeah, I've been doing this for 2 years now, and yeah, it's my passion. I turned my pain into purpose after losing my brother in 2018, and after leaving the corporate world, it was time to give something back and support others on their grief journey.
Yeah, and that's a lot of my story. I was in the corporate world for that was my last job, and I was there for about 16 and a half years, and I just felt like I'm not really making a difference in the lives of people. And
Mm.
so I found counseling and therapy, and it's like, wow, this is just where it's really at. And then of course I found, the specialty of grief, and it's like, oh my goodness, like these are my people here. So
Yeah.
I follow you on TikTok, and I see a lot of your posts. You're always encouraging people and putting up really, really good material. So I'll also put that in the show notes if people want to follow you there. But you seem to be quite the encourager, but that always comes at a price because I've found the people who encourage the most usually have found some really deep and great pains. And of course, I know of the loss of your brother, but there's other losses in life that we experience that I guess help us to continue our story in different ways. Like you said, making meaning through not only the loss of individuals, but the loss of relationship, or
Mm.
sometimes a loss of a career is really where people may find their identity. And like you stated before we were recording, we spoke a lot about identity in the last podcast. So it's, when we ask the question, who are you? I think that really changes by all the bumps and bruises that we go through in life. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, definitely. It defines us, doesn't it? Who we are, and we're forever evolving. And I don't think it's spoken about enough with, we don't just have one loss in life, whatever that is, whether it's, your stepped loss. And for me personally, it was losing, grandparents at an early age. Then the same year my brother died, my nan died, and then my best friend died. Um, and then this year, obviously, as you know, the separation of me and my ex-partner leaving, and it just resurfaces all that pain and your losses that you've had before, and which rolls into that identity. So grieving someone that is still here is incredibly hard too, but not just the person, it's the life that you were having. And then on top of the losses that you've already had. So I think it's really important to talk about those.
Yeah. And you're talking about a loss that I don't think we speak about much in life, and definitely not on this podcast. Most of what I've spoken of on this podcast has been the true death of an individual. But this is a grief that needs to be spoken about because it's um, oddly different, but at the same time, there's a lot of similarities. When you think about losing a spouse to death, it's a forced closure,
Mm.
and you know you have no other option. You can't say hello to that person. But I've spoken to you. I'm previously divorced, and one of the things that is really weird is when you see your ex out there. Like, I'll never forget the first time I went to the grocery store, and there she was, and she's like, "Hi," and I'm like, "Hi," and it was almost like me looking at a stranger. It's like I know that I've had a life with this person, but it's almost like seeing a ghost. It's really weird, and in death you don't have those opportunities, so you don't have as many. Well, maybe that's not fair. I was getting ready to say you don't have as many moments where things just pop up and catch you, but that's not true. But you don't have the individual catching you. Like, it's uh, if your spouse dies or anyone else in your family dies, you're not going to see them at the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting how it makes you feel and what it stirs up, and how many memories just start flashing through your mind whenever something brings that person to mind. But to see that individual in the flesh is completely different.
Yeah, and we're also not saying that, that having a funeral or anything like that is closure, because, we never have closure as grievers, and we never have the answers where we forever um have unanswered questions. But this is, you don't have closure on someone that's still here either, in a kind of different way. Um but yeah, it's almost like an unfinished grief, isn't it?
Yeah, and you make a great point. Emotionally, there is never closure in any grief. But as far as communication, that's the biggest difference, is the ability to communicate with an ex. And I want people to also realize that how many times does this happen in life with like a friendship? I always ask, how many of your school friends are you still friends with? And most people don't keep up with many. I'll be 51 here shortly, and there's only one or two people that I ever see from high school at this point, and those other relationships are potentially available out there. I just have to seek them. Or if I ran into a guy. It seems like I've run into everybody at the grocery store here apparently, because there was a guy from high school I haven't seen in many, many years, and saw him at the grocery store a few months ago, and he said, "Do you know who I am?" And of course, we've both lost a lot of hair since then. And I'm like, "Michael?" And he's like, "Yeah." And we talked for several minutes, and I think about all these old things from high school and stupid things that we did and said, and all these emotions and things flood back. It was a positive thing for my visit with Michael, because it was all fun things. But when you think about a relationship that did not end well, but that person is still out there, whether it's a disagreement in a friendship or an old boss that you didn't enjoy working for, those things all hit hard when you see that person.
Mm.
And then there's the, do I completely avoid that person? Like, do I start shopping at a different grocery store? Or, you walk into a restaurant like, okay, now I've lost my appetite. There's so much that we don't think about. But being emotionally connected to those people, it's a forever thing, you know?
Well, we've always spoke about the nervous system, haven't we?
Mhm.
They're triggers, and seeing someone can trigger your nervous system and dysregulate you. And you go into fight or flight mode, and it's like, well, what do I do? Do I talk to them? Then all your memories start coming flooding back, and so it's dysregulating for you. It's takes you out of that safety that you once had safety with a person, and then all of a sudden that's completely gone. Your safety net's gone, your comfort zone's gone, everything's kind of shattered into a million pieces. And the same with,
Mhm.
losing someone that is no longer here. Everything is dysregulated. And yeah, I totally get that, whether it's a friend, someone that you haven't seen for a long time, or an ex partner. It dysregulates you, and that's why it all kind of wraps up into that same, all the emotions of the grief comes back, and you do go through the, listen, I'm not one of those for the timelines of grief. There is no timelines, we know that, but you still ride those waves. And I describe separating with someone as almost like a mini grief. That's what it was, almost like a fast and a quick version, a sped up version of grief, and something that you'll always be dipping in and out of.
Yeah. There's a word, I looked it up here real quick just so I can give a clearer definition than what's in my head. We talk about homeostasis, which is our bodies staying in balance, but there's always something that's going to try to knock us off of balance. And I guess we just call that life, whether it's grief or just normal living. But the word I'm thinking of is allostasis, and it says it's the combination of body responses to stress that
Mm,
help brains and bodies return to optimal functioning. And so allostasis really takes a picture of everything that we've ever been through and everything that we're currently going through. And really, the question that it's asking is, am I safe? And
yeah,
really, our bodies and our minds are always trying to seek safety in all things.
yeah,
And when we see truly this ghost of our past in living form through an old relationship, it knocks us out of that homeostasis. And then our body, whether it is rapid heartbeat or the thought of I am going to go eat somewhere else or whatever, that's allostasis in form, basically stating I've got to get you back to safety.
yeah,
And I really feel like we underestimate our minds when it goes to the question, am I safe? You know?
yeah, definitely. I think for me as well, what shocked me about my relationship ending was that I didn't just grieve the relationship emotionally. I went straight back to that familiar feeling of pain of my brother passing.
Mm.
That's where it took me. The same pain right here. I can feel it every time I talk about him, but it was that pain that just rips through your body. And it like I say, is that familiar sense of pain. You're like, I've been here before. I've felt this pain before. That's why it took me. It's just like your body recognizing the loss, isn't it? Um, just to kind of make sense what was happening.
Yeah. Yeah. When they say the body keeps the score, it is so
Mm.
true. And even when your mind doesn't immediately recognize, your body does. Whether it's, like I said, rapid heartbeat, sweaty palms, whatever it is, there's a physical response that's usually initiated before the mind catches up.
Yeah.
And before we were speaking, or before we started recording, I was mentioning what's considered new old loss, and I think that term was kind of coined by Alan Wolfelt, a great in the grief community, and that new old loss is basically stating that a new loss, separation from an ex partner, triggers an old loss, something that is not settled. And of course, like we stated, grief never settles an account. It's always there. There may be a lesser form of how much grief that visits us on a daily basis, but the grief is always there. So when we experience something new, a lot of times it is a physiological response that, oh my goodness, this same feeling that when I lost my uh, spouse to a separation has ignited this same feeling that I felt when I lost my brother, right? And it's the physiological response, or that feeling that we have inside of our bodies that makes us connect the two, at least in how we feel. And I think that's why it stirs up some of that old grief again. It's like, wow, I thought I was doing well, but maybe I'm not doing as well as I thought. Did you have that question?
Yeah, but also for me, it was that huge sense of abandonment. And then you go, when I lost my brother, I thought, is this how it's going to be now? Is everybody going to leave me? And
Hmm.
I think for me, losing close people and then losing you separate from your partner, which was kind of I've got my parents, but losing your partner that is your meant to be your life partner and that's been there with you through all of this. It's that abandonment that you feel. Is this going to be what's going to happen now? Again, you go back to that safety feeling.
Mhm.
Is this going to be a repeating pattern? So it takes you to so many places, as grief does, and so many questions. But yeah, it opens up a lot. And as we said as well, and we talked about a lot last time, it's the identity is huge because after a loss or a separation or divorce, who am I now?
Mm. Yeah.
Who is Sarah after losing her brother? Who is, losing a sibling? Now who is Sarah? Just thought I'd spent 8 years on that journey. Well, who am I now? Who is Sarah? Who was Sarah 17 years ago? Um, Before? Who is Sarah after? Identity is such a huge part, isn't it, of grief?
It is. And I used to believe that it was um, fairly consistent, but I do believe the more things that we go through in life, like I said, the bumps and bruises, uh, the more that it molds us into who maybe we were always to become, but not always were.
Mm.
That's probably the best way I can state it. And when you're talking about abandonment, it takes me down this path of abandonment, no matter what, does not feel good because the questions are always, what's wrong with me? Why is this happening to me? It's abandonment does focus a lot on us, but it's also, why is this person not here? When you think about a physical loss, there's no choice in that abandonment, right? They're gone, and there's no coming back. With a spouse or a partner or even friendships, or like I stated, a working relationship, the abandonment a lot of times is a choice. And but I don't know that it changes our pain level, you know? And this does go back to the safety thing.
I know that we said before last time, it's so important to sit through that pain though. It's so important to feel every emotion, and as hard as it is, and you really don't want to go there. I do believe that sitting there, feeling it all, will bring you out the other side of some sort. I'm not saying it's going to be the answer. It's going to be a long journey for me, and as grievers, we're forever going to be on those journeys. But I do sit with the pain, and I I know that two emotions can exist at the same time.
Mm.
Uh, you can have hope, and you can have pain, and you can have love, and you can have pain, and these can exist at the same time. So I do understand that, but I think for me, I would like people listening to know that they can exist. It's all right for us to sit here and say that we've learned this a lot, but I want other people to know that they can sit with more than one emotion. It is okay.
Yeah, I think that's where, the term bittersweet was kind of coined from. Like, this hurts, but there's still a sweetness to this. I can think on the great times with an individual, but this abandonment piece that you were talking about, this hurts, right? This, whether it is physical loss or if that person is still out there. Um, there was something else I was going to say. Oh, yes. So when you're talking about pain, pain is an indicator that something's wrong. Something's not in that homeostasis uh, sequence, right? And think about what life would be if there were no pain. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that's like, yes, Brad, that's what I want. That feels really good. But you also said it's really important for us to sit with certain emotions. Pain is an indicator that something's wrong. I sit there and think of, can you imagine breaking your leg and not realizing that it's broken because there's no pain there? How
Yeah.
long before potential infection or other things that would go wrong that could become life threatening because you couldn't feel the pain. I
Yeah.
think with grief it's the same thing. You have to pay now or pay later. And I always say if you pay later, you're going to pay with interest, period.
Yeah, it is easier said than done. I totally understand that people will sit there and go, no, I'm going to put it in a box. I'll think about it later. I'll deal with it later. Um, yeah, I don't. I know that it will cut, but I think I've always been like that. I want to deal with it now. I want to try and process as much as I can now. And you never have the answers to anything. You might not even get the closure that you want, but the only thing I can do is focus on myself. You can focus on yourself, and you can grow or get to a place of growth.
It's interesting how people deal with certain things differently. I'm also an immediate processor. Like, I want to throw all my cards on the table. Let's work
Yeah.
through this. My
Don't.
wife is not like that at all. In fact, our first biggest argument ever was because I wanted to process through something and she didn't. And she said things that she regretted, blew up on me. And she's like, this is why I needed time. And so the
Yeah.
next time we were having a pretty big discussion, I'm like, come on, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And she's like, do you remember last time? I'm like, okay, I'll see you in an hour. It's
Yeah.
so I've learned that people do process things quite differently. Grief is no different, but I still encourage people to feel, and a lot of people don't want to feel. They want to, like you said, box things up, put it on a shelf for a while, and come back and deal with it when they think that they're more able to deal with it. But I don't think that's a wise thing. I don't think that you need to be in counseling the day after, the death of a loved one. But I also don't think that you need to let it sit for a year before you decide I need to work through this with someone else.
Yeah. And that's what I want people to, the people that are out there that have had stacked losses and you think, okay, I've had one loss and everyone keeps leaving me. I want them to hold on to that hope and know that you will get through this. And that's not something that everybody wants to hear. And you do start to question yourself, why me? Why
Yeah.
is this happening to me? It doesn't happen to everyone else around me. And we can say it, it's not just that it doesn't even have to be a loss of a person. It could be, you could have lost your job, you could have been made redundant. All of these are valid losses as well that have an impact on your day-to-day life and your identity.
Yeah. I call it compound loss, you call it stacked loss. And I really like that because if you think about pancakes and, it's you're really just stacking one loss on top of another. And again, it's like, my goodness, I haven't even consumed the first part yet. And now you're throwing something else into this fire. It's like, oh my gosh, this is too much. And, when you think about, any loss, there are still daily tasks that have to be done, whether it's feeding the kids, doing the laundry, mowing the lawn, paying bills. Those things never end. And then you throw in another loss, and it's like, oh my goodness, I cannot stay above water here. And the more losses that we have, I think the harder it is to keep swimming, and like you stated, one loss may make you think of another. Whenever I told my therapist years ago, my four hardest losses, think about them. It was my parents' divorce that kicked this off whenever I was 15.
Yeah.
My divorce whenever I was 28, I believe. So it's like, okay, that loss immediately made me think of my parents' loss. Then I had the physical loss of my best friend 15 years ago. And then I had a loss of a relationship with the woman that I dated before my wife now, which goes back to at least the first two losses that I spoke of, right? Only one out of those four were physical losses, but all four could make me feel abandoned,
Yeah.
right?
Back to that word again.
Yeah. I think that's an underscored word and something that we really could camp out on for a long time. But unfortunately, it's something that we pass over. And a lot of times we jokingly say, or not even jokingly, but, so many times we talk about people having abandonment issues. You know, I think we all do. When it
Yeah.
comes to loss, every loss is an abandonment of something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How many losses do we, I guess, reference as a loss if we chose it? Not many. If I quit a job, I just quit a job. If I get fired from a job or I retire from a job, it becomes a loss. That's interesting.
Yeah. And also, I always say to my clients, I'm going to be really, really honest with you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your loss is. As I say, they're all valid. But this is a journey, and you can be, we can support our clients and other people, and you have friends and you have family and your support network around you. But ultimately, you are on this journey alone.
Mm,
You are on this journey alone. Only you, your journey is as unique as, and your loss is as unique as a fingerprint. So this is your journey, your pace, and you are supported by other people. But that's why it's so important to be able to sit with your pain and sit with your emotions because it is only you that can do it at the end of the day.
yeah. I've had a gentleman on this podcast that I met at a continuing education. I'm lucky to have Bob Niemeyer as my mentor and friend, a very great man in the grief world. But this other gentleman that was teaching there, Jakob, he led this class, and one of the things that he said was, I want you to hold out your hands as if you're holding a cup. And he said, I want you to think about this is your cup to hold. There's nobody else in the world that has the contents of this cup, whether it's your loss or whatever's going on. As a therapist or coach, we want to come alongside and just like, oh, let me take that away from you. But we can't. But
Mm,
what we can do is put our hands around that client and state, I will help you hold this, but it's still your cup, right? I will support you, but I can't take the contents away. I can't remove this cup from you. I'll support you. And it was just like this moment when I realized how many things that I've gone through that I just wanted to go away. I want somebody to be my superhero and come in and just save the day and take this away from me.
yeah.
Nobody can. But who you surround yourself with, whether it be a therapist, a coach, a friend, a family member, whatever, it's really important because they can help you brace, I guess, some of the impact or the weight of this grief that's going on inside of you. I think we don't, I guess, recognize the people in our lives who are making it just a little bit more bearable just by being around and having them as a support. They can't take your cup though. That's the
No,
problem.
but grief needs to be witnessed. No matter what the grief is, it needs to be witnessed and it needs to be heard. And that is what is so important. Just to be heard, just to be witnessed, to know that your grief is valid, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a divorce, pet loss, it's all valid and it just needs to be witnessed by someone.
Well, that's it. You said the word valid, and that's what witnessing does. It validates, it says that this was real. What you're feeling is real. So, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
so important.
So, I'm trying to think here. So, you've experienced loss of a family member physically, and then loss of this ex partner. Can you tell me maybe some similarities and maybe some differences of what you felt?
Yeah, the pain was the same, and I guess that, like I said to you before, it's almost like a quick version of a grief. You're going through it. You go through that shock, denial, anger, all of those emotions, but it's almost like then you see them. So you come back down, round to that, whereas you're not going to, I'm not going to see my brother again in this lifetime. I know that. But you also, you go through this kind of miniature grief and then you see them again. And then you might go back round again to this grief. And yeah, it's a really difficult one to explain. And there's a lot that I'm grateful for. I'm not going to sit here and say I have regrets. I'm not like that. I'm not that person. But I have a lot to be grateful for, especially my son. But and that's another whole kettle of fish is when you have children with someone that
I
you
was,
separated for.
yeah, I was just thinking the exact same thing. And it forever connects you to that person. It's here in the US, a lot of people think that, okay, age 18, they're graduated high school. There's no legal bearing as far as having to stay connected to an ex spouse or ex partner. But when you think about when your son marries or graduates college or has your first grandchild or whatever, like those are all things that that other person is going to be connected to, and I've seen it time and time and time again. I've not witnessed the grandchild yet. I'm sure that'll be a year or two down the road, but I've gone through my daughter graduating college. I've gone through the wedding. There's been certain events, like with my son-in-law and his new career, where all of our family got together, and it's like, well, there's my ex-wife. Luckily, we're at a place where things have changed. I'm 23 years removed from that loss in my life, so things are quite different than what they were whenever I would say, like, my daughter was 11 months old when we separated. That's all she's ever known. But I would say for the first 4 or 5 years, things were not good. And it was just like, we quickly passed off my daughter, just like, okay, here you go. Here's her bags, and everything was good this weekend. Have a good life, And it was just, how quickly can I get out of this woman's sight? And now it's just like, hey, how are you? It's we're cordial, and there's no uh, arguing or anything, and I wish her well, and I hope that life is going well for her. But it's not always that way. But your son will always be the thing that keeps you connected. It's so weird. So there is this forever connection. You know.
And if you have children, when you're going through that separation, you also grieve for your children because you grieve not just for the life that I was going to have, you grieve for them as well. What's going to change for that for my children?
Mm, yeah.
So that's and I okay, not the same in any way, but I relate to, my brother passing and he had young children. So I grieved for them
Mm,
and the life that they would never have with my brother and all the times and for instance, today, my niece got her, I don't know what you call it over there, but my niece got her GCSE results. So like she's, done her exams to leave secondary school, high school, as you call
okay.
it over there. That's a big thing. Yeah, my brother will never be there to see that. I
Mm,
don't get me wrong, I know he's around her all the time and I believe that, but physically he's not here.
yeah.
Yeah, I grieve for my son in a different way because he will see that, but not as a family unit, not in the way that I wanted it to be.
So I'm going to throw you and myself under the bus, Sarah.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much of that is the thought process of an empathic individual, though. Like, does everyone grieve that for other people? I would say no, especially there are some people that I'll just say are selfish and can only think of themselves. They can't
Hmm.
see the vision for life through another's eyes. But I think it's easy for you because I know your character. I know a lot of your identity, and I know myself well enough to know that um, if I like you, I'm going to grieve for you. I'm going to do everything and feel everything that you feel. Like that's part of who I am, and I can't change it. There's times where I would love to turn that off and be like, I don't have enough room to grieve for myself and to grieve for for my daughter. But I think that's built off of who you are as an individual, and not everybody I think is capable of that.
Do you know what? I totally agree with that 100% because we are the way we are. And I'm going to be totally honest here. Would my ex-partner be capable of grieving for my son and going, no. And I'm not just saying that because he's a man. I know the person that he is, and I don't think he would sit there and grieve in the same way. Um, but yeah, that's no offense to him, but I think we are the way we are, and we do this work because of the people that we are. And yeah, I am grieving for my son's life that he won't have. Yeah, we know that children are resilient, more resilient at that age. Um, but yeah, I totally agree with that.
You know, whenever I first started counseling and I was still in my internship, I had a really, really hard first case where I had to call Department of Children's Services. And I came home and literally started crying. And my wife's like, "Are you going to be able to do this job?" And I said, "Yes, but you don't expect this on your first client ever."
Yeah.
It was like throwing me to the wolves. Here I'm having to call about drugs in the home and a child, being beat and, all these things. And it's like I hurt for that child, and I have had to learn how to separate myself to some degree from my clients. And it's because I can't take 35, 40 people home with me every single night and still be able to live my life. So
Yeah.
I think we all have to learn what are our boundaries when it comes to grieving for other individuals. And two, this is kind of a bad thing for us, but sometimes we can be so empathic towards individuals that we forget how to give them tools. We almost get pulled down into that pit with them if we're not careful. So it's like, how do I stay focused? How do I see this clearly enough to be able to give them tools to not only survive, but to learn to thrive?
Mm.
So um, how do we tune down that empath part of ourselves? It's hard.
It's
When you love people, it's hard.
yeah, definitely. Definitely been there in those situations, especially in group sessions. But one thing I just want to touch on as well, it just come back to me. I ran a grief workshop before Christmas, and it was no more than six people. They were all ladies, and I'd obviously had calls with them all before just to run through what it entailed, how long it would go on for. And so I was on the phone. I call them discovery calls, just to see if it's right for them and vice versa. And she said, "Look, Sarah, I want to come, but I feel like a fraud." And I
Mm.
said, "Why?" She said, "My son left the house 2 years ago and I haven't seen him since. He doesn't want any contact with us. I don't know if he's alive." She said he was 2 years ago. He cut all contact from us. He had a lot of mental health issues. He was in a mental, like a mental institute for a little while. They signed him off. They let him go, and she hadn't seen him for 2 years. She said, "So I don't even know if my son is out there alive or not." She said, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know where he's living." She said, I am grieving for my son." She said, "But I feel like a fraud because he's, well, as far as I know," she went, "he's still alive." And I said, "But that is valid. You are more than welcome here." She had lost her stepdad as well. And so this on top of it. But she felt like a fraud. And I said, "You are not a fraud. That is valid. You're still grieving your son and the relationship you had, relationship you would have had. So, yeah,
There's only one difference between what she was experiencing versus a mother who had lost her son physically.
yeah,
The only difference is a funeral.
yeah,
Period. right?
Yeah.
And I often wonder, do people who have gone through a long-term separation like that from a child or spouse or whatever, and we don't know if they're dead or alive out there, should we have some type of a personal ceremony to, I think when you look at funerals, it's almost like it initiates the true mourning process, not just grief, but that external portion of our grief when it comes out through mourning. And I wonder if someone like that, because honestly, there's someone in my mind right now that is in my life that is going through a very similar situation, and I wonder, should they start, should they have some type of a ceremony that says this is real to me. Nobody else is going to grieve this son that you're speaking of, like that. They, there's not been an obituary, there's no casket to see here, so nobody knows to grieve it. But a mother who is forever connected to their child says this hurts. They're missing. It's no different than, uh, you think about years ago, we had milk cartons with children's
Yeah.
pictures on them, right? And it said, I don't know if this person's dead or alive, but they're important enough for me to put out a $10,000 reward. Help me find them. Help me find the rest of their story. This hurts.
Yeah.
Um, and on the other side of that milk carton is, parents that are longing for their kid to be returned safely.
Yeah.
So I feel for that mother that you speak of, and but I don't know if having some type of a ceremony, obviously a private ceremony or whatever, but just something that says this is real. Maybe even creating a memorial for a living person. I don't think that's a wrong thing, whether it's a rock with a name on it in your backyard, whether it's planting a tree for
No.
what was, and still being able to care for something in their memory. I don't know. I don't know that there's a great answer, but there's certainly a lot of ideas we could kick around.
That's why it's so important to talk about this ambiguous grief because there are so many different parts to it and people there may be someone out there that can relate to this and is going through this and exactly what you said, a memorial or like a tree or something. It's that continuing bond, carrying on that continuum in bond. Like that's what I talk about with my clients all the time. And, when they've lost someone, the continuing bonds is really important to keep that going. So maybe, yeah, what we did was something really lovely. It was just before Christmas. And right at the last session, we all created a memory bauble for the tree so they brought their own stuff. So she created that for him. It had his picture in. It was something that she could put up every year. She said it breaks my heart. She said, but I'm gonna do a memory bauble for him. And that's where, I talk about continuing bonds and just something they can get out every year. Don't have to get it out at Christmas. Um, but yeah, it's a real tough one, and I just don't feel like it's spoke about enough. People, all what we spoke about, people that are alive, they can be alive and you can still grieve.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, and I feel like it needs to be done. I feel like it's a necessary process.
Yeah,
And like you stated earlier, you can still hold the hope that that person's going to come back. That is the great thing with the belief that they're still out there, they're still alive. Maybe one day, they'll wake up. Maybe it is coming off of drugs. Maybe it is giving up a certain relationship that brings a child back home or restores some type of a relationship out there.
yeah,
That it's hard, but I feel like everybody has to live their own life too, and that child, there may be an embarrassment factor of, being on drugs or whatever it is that says, I don't know that I can go back home. But also having a parent that is eagerly awaiting a reunion with a child, I think is a beautiful thing. And really, until somebody is a parent, I'm not sure that they'll understand that.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. This has gone way deeper. I really feel like we may have to have a third episode at
We
some
always
point,
do,
Sarah.
Brad.
You're going to be my regular guest from now on.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. So, what other things can you think of, down the lines of ambiguous grief? And, one thing I will state with that too is there's a lot of people out there who may be caregivers who
Mm.
are watching, maybe a person's mind drift away when the body is still there. That is equally as hard, especially, say a 50-year marriage and you're watching your spouse who no longer recognizes you when you come to visit. It's got to be so hard.
Yeah, all those years and all those memories, and again, I can only talk from my experience of losing my nan to dementia and going to see her, the early days, and I spent a lot of time with her where she started to not wash, not eat, take care of herself. So the kind of personal hygiene started to go, yet she'd know who I was, but it was herself. She forgot she couldn't drive. Then she went into a home, and it was almost like overnight I turned up and who are you?
Mm,
And I took my son, who was quite young at the time. I want to say he was about 10, 11. And he just couldn't understand. And she, because with dementia as well, she got quite nasty and she was screaming. And yeah, that was the one and only time that I took my son, and he that traumatized him. But it all those memories that I shared with my nan, growing up, and it just almost felt like they were gone. And it's hard. It's hard. You suffer that loss twice.
mm,
The loss
that's
of
right.
the person, and then physically,
Yeah.
um, you go through it. But
Mm,
yeah, I my heart goes out to all those people that are caregivers and looking after their loved ones, that especially dementia and Alzheimer's.
yeah.
Um,
Sarah, there's one other loss that I want to throw in here as far as what you refer to as stacked losses, and it is the loss of the vision of the future of your life. How do you think that has affected you, and how are you changing maybe the way you live, or what that recreating or creating a new vision for yourself? What's that look like for you?
hmm, I would say that I I'm healing again. I'm on my healing journey, and whatever that looks like, I think, well, for me, it looks like taking day by day and moment by moment. I'm not sitting here planning anything, concentrating on my children, concentrating on me, self-care, and really finding out who is Sarah now at this stage in her life. Um, it's a tough one, Brad. I sometimes have answers and sometimes I don't, but I know that I need to sit with the pain, feel the pain, and yeah, I can't really say. It's a tough one, but I just know that I need to to heal.
Yeah. And I remember reaching out. I hope isn't an overshare for the podcast, but I remember reaching out to you a while back and just stating, "Hey, how are you?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm kind of taking a break from social media stuff for a little bit, you know." And I think that's something that we need to do is learn to listen to our bodies, listen to our minds, and know when we need to proceed, when we need to pause, sometimes when we need to go back in reverse and find things that we've left behind. So I think it's a really intelligent move to be able to state that, you know what, I need to pause, I need a break, or whatever, and learn when to re-engage, and also when we don't have a clear future, be okay with that, to know that I don't have everything figured out. And I've learned too that even if I think I have my future figured out, something's going to shake that up, and I'm going to have to learn to move and maybe alter that vision for the future, whether it is the death of someone that I love, whether it is the end of a relationship, the end of a career, whatever it is. I have to be flexible and willing. I think that's the other part, be willing to change. And I know people don't like change unless they are the ones that administer that and want it, right?
Yeah.
I tell my clients all the time, if I walk out my door and you change all my furniture around and I come back in here, I'm going to be really, really upset. But if you walk out and I change my furniture and you come back next week and you feel out of place, well, that's kind of your problem. I'm happy. I made the change, right? It's um so when we're in control of the change, we're okay with it. When life brings the change to us, it can really disturb us.
Yeah. And right now, like I say, I'm healing, I'm doing what's right for me, and I just want to be at peace at the moment and figure things out day by day. And I always say to my clients, um, I'm a griever before a grief coach. I get it.
Yes.
Um, but I do get it. And, that's why I want to sit here as a grief coach and say we go through things as well. We go through those losses and separations and divorce and job losses too, like everybody else. So yeah,
I think a lot of times professionals are looked at as if we're untouchable, that
yeah,
no harm, no bad has ever come to us. And I've always tried to be open with all of my clients, and I think it has made me more approachable. It's made me more relatable with my clients.
yeah, definitely.
And there's one thing that we all share, and it's being human. And it's being human is tough. Let's call it for what it is. It's tough, and nobody escapes, not just nobody escapes death, obviously, but nobody escapes pain either. You were talking about we have to sit with that, and it's not easy. And but we're all called to different lives, different walks, and the things that you've experienced, I may not be able to fully understand. But if I can say that I've been in a similar circumstance, not that I know exactly how you feel, I hate that. I hate that more
Yeah,
than anything. But to
yeah,
state I've been in a similar circumstance, but then follow it up with, but Sarah, tell me your story, right? Telling our story is very, very important. And I think we need the safe space to be able to share. And I certainly appreciate you coming on yet again. And like I said, we'll come up with another subject and bring you back again. But I love hearing your continued journey. I love hearing that you're continuing to help people. But I also like to hear that you're continuing to work on the inward part of you. The things that are creating a better Sarah for the future. So,
Always.
any
Yeah.
final thoughts or anything that you want to share with listeners before we close it out?
No, just that we are here to support others, and yeah, we get it. We're between us. We've been through quite a lot as well, and yeah, we're here to support other people. They don't have to be alone.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, I will put your information in the show description for people to reach out to you. Certainly appreciate all that you do out there in the community.
Thank you.
And thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah. Listeners, thanks for joining in. I hope you've gained a lot from this episode. I'll put Sarah's information in the show description, and I will catch you on the next episode. Have a great day, everyone.